Kitâôowahsinoon.
Papa's Chase.
Kitâôowahsinoon. Omakoyas.
Edmonton.
These are just some of the names used to describe the geographical space, or Kitâôowahsinoon, of Edmonton. In a way, each successive name describes a different era of culture and people in this Kitâôowahsinoon. Edmonton has always been a home of immigrants. In fact, the Cree and Blackfoot, who are most credited as the original inhabitants, began settling this area largely after 1670, upon trading for weapons with the British, who had established trading posts in Cree territory. These two tribes formed a military and trade relationship between the Blackfoot and Iron Confederacy, though the Cree initially remained the masters of this relationship due to the trading posts and therefore military power being under their exclusive control. With the establishment of Edmonton House in 1795 within Blackfoot territory, the Blackfoot no longer needed to be friendly to the Cree because their ability to acquire weapons was secured. The Cree and Blackfoot were thus already at odds with each other in 1800. In the following decades, with diminishing bison populations, these tribes became increasingly violent and competitive with each other, culminating in the Battle of Belly River, which the Blackfoot won.
After this point, the Cree were especially weakened and starving, encouraging them to sign the treaties which guaranteed basic necessities with the Canadian government.
At this point in history, the narrative switched from Omakoyas and Amiskwaciwâskahikan to Edmonton. The focus was no longer on the previous warring inhabitants, but on the city and its progression to the future. Dwayne Donald refers to this as Pentimento.
But the indigenous inhabitants were not simply gone, because their civilization was absorbed. They signed on to treaties and became status Indians, or accepted scrip and lost their land but received a sum of money.
There were numerous major figures in the disconnection of indigenous stories from the mainstream as well as colonization in general, but we will focus on two that are still honored in Edmonton. This is the location of the house of Frank Oliver. Frank Oliver moved to this Kitâôowahsinoon in 1880 and founded the Edmonton Bulletin, which he then used to vilify the Papa's Chase Cree who had been granted reserve land just southeast of the North Saskatchewan River. His information campaign was successful in that along with the newcomer settlers to the area, the reserve was petitioned to leave in 1891 with the arrival of the Canadian Pacific Railway in the nearby town of Strathcona. The city of Edmonton now had room to grow, and I think this is the reason Oliver is so honored in Edmonton with a residence, school, and neighborhood all named after him, because his actions, malicious though they were, allowed the city to expand. This is the controversy within history and our sense of place now. How do we comparatively quantify the good and bad things a historical figure has done? Oliver helped disenfranchise an entire tribe of Cree, while at the same time opening up the space to residential, urban, and commercial growth, to members of my family who immigrated in the 1960s to Edmonton and were able to find work wiring the upcoming buildings, were able to find jobs teaching in the schools in these new neighborhoods, and raise their families.
Does a right justify a wrong?
Here we have a statue of Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill is most well known for having been Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during World War II, a war in which the UK won. But Churchill was an imperialist who believed that the British Empire brought prosperity to all of its subjects, including the indigenous people right here on Treaty 6 land. He was also a racist who believed in the supremacy of the British people. Nonetheless, he evoked a sense of spirit and pride in Commonwealth subjects all over the world, especially in his speeches such as "We Shall Fight on the Beaches," where he called to action citizens all over the world to never surrender. Without getting into a debate about the outcome of World War II, would a loss for the Allies have really benefited the indigenous peoples right here in Edmonton? It's hard to say whether an occupation by Germany would have brought any change.
Ultimately, these debates about historical figures end up trying to quantify their wrongs versus their rights, and at least in a modern context, the wrongs seem to be highlighted much more than their rights.
How then do we honor important historical figures while at the same time presenting their not so attractive views? We contextualize it. We neither praise nor defame these individuals, but provide the necessary background information. We need to realize that people at different times in history haven't always thought like us, and we should not hold them accountable in the same way we don't want future generations holding us accountable for our love of social media and pumpkin spice lattes. Edmonton is our home. Some of us are Napikoaksai, who just arrived in this land a few years ago or just to attend university. Some of us are the descendants of immigrants from Europe, Asia, and Africa
who settled in Canada over the last few decades. And some of us can't trace back when our ancestors got to this land. But we are all here now, thinking of our future, falling in love, trying to make the best of things. I hope as we move into the future, we learn the past of this space without getting too lost in it.